they no longer accept my dues. I'm an honorary member, so I send a
Right.
contribution every year to maintain my membership
Right.
in the guild.
Yeah, I remember, speaking of going back with the guild, when did you join the guild?
Probably in 1955,
Yeah.
something like that.
So even before that, I remember somebody asked me once my memories of the war. So I was born in '43. And my only memory of the war was putting color into margarine. You had a white thing and you had a red dot, and they would give it to the little kids to make it all yellow and smooth it out. So I wonder, your memories of the war, I mean, what do you remember of those war times? Like, did you have?
My memory starts before we entered World War II. It starts with the Spanish Civil War.
Oh my gosh.
I was in high school, and in those days, the high school was responsible for you from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, whatever their session was, and you were not allowed out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And we could see the Hunter College girls, young women, picketing for our government to lift the embargo which they had on Spain. They were not sending arms to the Spanish Republic fighting against the Royalists, who did not accept the vote. The Spanish Republican won the vote. The Royalists would not accept it and started the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So we put an embargo on sending arms to Spain, but we did not have an embargo on sending arms to Germany and Italy, which in turn was sending arms
to the
Royalists.
Right.
So Hunter College women were out picketing with signs saying, "Lift the embargo on Spain," which we could see from the windows in our high school.
Wow.
They were sort of 2 blocks down.
Right.
And I guess that was my first introduction to the war, which hadn't yet become a world war.
Right.
But Hitler had already started his purge of the Jews, and being Jewish myself, I was certainly aware of that before lots of other people were aware of it.
Right.
So that's how...
Right. And you were active politically, were you?
Yes, yeah. I became active politically at that point, trying to influence our government to do something about the Nazi purge of the Jews in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as we know, as the years went on, it not only became a rounding up of politically active Jews, it was rounding up all the Jews of Europe. Wherever the Germans gained control of whatever area, as we later learned, they did it in France, and certainly in Italy when they got that far down south. They just rounded up Jews wherever they were, and first said they were putting them in concentration camps, but later we learned, of course, that they were killing them wholesale.
Right.
So I was, of course, against that, the Nazi movement.
Yeah. Do you remember, what sorts of things could you do as, like, you were in college then, or where were you, when did you first become like politically active? You mentioned seeing the Hunter College girls and everything, and then was it right from there? Did you start carrying a picket or whatever? Or?
I think I was more on the collecting money and places I worked. Well, the union I belonged to was active, had its activities, anti-war activities, or helping the soldiers that were on our side,
Right.
who would have the time off in New York City, and we had a dance hall for them, or just social where they could come and chat with women and
Right.
dance,
Right.
have a cup of coffee,
Right.
that sort of thing.
I wonder if, so, recently now in Seattle, well, I guess all around the world, but there's been, now it's talking about prejudice, racism, and prejudice bias against Asian Americans, as well as, well, all people of color. And so I wonder if, you have such a long lens on this, starting with the Spanish Civil War or whatever. Does it seem to you like, are we ever gonna,
It seems like, no, we will always find someone to be prejudiced against. The anti-Asian is not new. Actually, in our country, anti-Asian started after the railroad was built, because the railroad imported Asian men to do the hard labor on building the railroad. And once the railroad was built, they didn't need these laborers anymore, but they had no way, they'd never made enough money to go back home, and they weren't going to go back home after living here, where in the United States, where I'm sure life was a little easier than being a laborer in China or Korea or wherever they imported them, because they would literally go and bring them back. There were firms, the business was to collect laborers to build the railroad. So we had that even before. There was the Chinese laundry in my neighborhood, and the woman had a baby and I had a baby, except I was free to, my husband made a living so that I was free to take her to the park during the day. But here, this woman in the laundry, her baby was in a playpen in the window of the store. She didn't have time to take her baby to the park to play.
Right.
So I used to go in and talk to her as I would walk by and see the baby in the window, and I learned that she would have loved to have lived in an apartment, but no landlord would let rent to Asian people. So she was living behind the store where they did the ironing and packing of the mainly shirts and sheets that they handled. She was living in a room behind the front of the store, where she had a toilet. I don't think she had a shower. She had a burner, a kind of camp burner stove to cook on. And I said, what about, and there were plenty of vacant apartments at that time. Nobody would rent to her, she said.
Oh.
So there was anti-Asian back then too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is not new, it's just exacerbated. I think it's gotten worse. We always had, as far as I knew, in Manhattan there was a section called Chinatown.
Mm.
And the people who lived there the Asian people couldn't rent outside of that given area. The landlords outside of the given area would not rent to them.
Yeah.
Of course, in recent years, when I've gone back to the area, there used to be a sharp division between Chinatown and what we call Little Italy. Now, that sharp division is no longer there. The Asian people have moved into Little Italy, pressure of space
Yeah.
being what it is.
Yeah.
The last time I was there, that sharp division was no longer visible.
Well, that might be a slightly hopeful sign then, maybe, or not. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
Right.
I think it's more the pressure of space that insists that they have to.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't, it's a sort of unfathomable topic to me. I mean, what can you do, or what has been done, but especially what can an individual do? Have you, well, I don't know when you moved to Seattle, so that's a question. Get us talking about space and the pressure of space. When did you move to Seattle?
In 2000.
And what was the reason? Can you?
I moved here because my daughter, who's a modern dancer, got her first job with a dance company here, and she loved the area. And when the dance company broke up because of financial problems, I said, "When are you coming home?" And she said, "I am home." So this became her home. And then when my husband retired, and it was obvious that we were 3,000 miles between us, and both he and I were getting older, and we decided that that was too big a distance between our family, our children,
Right.
and ourselves, so we moved to where she was.
Yeah. So where did you move in Washington? You
In
moved?
2000.
No, but I mean, where? Where in Washington?
Oh, I moved to,
Just the general area. Did you come to Seattle straight away?
I came to Seattle straight away,
Okay.
bought a house near the Leschi
Right.
neighborhood.
Seattle districts always baffle me. I never know if it's in Queen Anne or Madrona or Leschi, or I don't know what the boundaries are. People seem to know exactly.
I think the boundaries are what the neighborhood makes it.
Well, well, that's a good point. So you moved into a house.
We bought a house, a beautiful house, much nicer than the one we had east, and lived there until 2019, I guess it was, until my husband died, and then I lived there alone for 5 years. But when I began to lose my eyesight and couldn't drive anymore, I felt that it was too difficult to live in a big house alone, not being able to drive, and so I moved to
University house.
University House.
Yeah. So, and how, can you tell a little bit about your, how was your move into University House? Was it easy for you, or was
My
it?
move was very easy because I had a neighbor a friend who was a neighbor, who lived not far from me in the Leschi area, and she moved here first, and I used to come here and have lunch with her and her husband once a month. I put down a deposit on an apartment, and being a depositor, I could have a free lunch once a month. So I would come at least once a month and have lunch with these people who had moved here before me. So when it was time for me to move, I was very familiar with University House.
Yeah.
and knew some people already
Right.
from coming here once a month.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's a good program that they have, right, to introduce people. So I wonder, do you have, advice is always a dangerous thing, but, as an elder of the tribe, would you have words of advice to people if you were running things? What advice would you give to people coming up, to the younger people or people now coming?
Well, it depends on what your interests are. One of the reasons I was particularly eager to move to University House was my husband and I had always been interested in music and film and theater, and University House was one of the few places that had a bus and took us to places like Meany Hall or the
Places.
all of a sudden I can't think of the
Right.
name.
It takes you to places, the opera, the theater,
Exactly, the
dance.
opera, the theater, concerts, movie houses, and so on. So neither my husband nor I were driving at this point in time, and so we would have had to take a taxi. That becomes expensive,
Right.
and it's not difficult to get a taxi to take you to the concert
Right.
at 7 o'clock.
Right, but after.
But it's going back home again that becomes a problem.
Right.
So having a bus that took you from where you were living to the concert hall or movie theater and brought you back again, it was...
So would you advise people as they're getting older to come to a place like University House, or
If you need that kind of transportation, absolutely. If you are interested in people, meeting people who are interested in the things you're interested in, it certainly is a wonderful place.
Right.
And we used to have the theater group,
Right. Hopefully we will again after
yes,
COVID.
as soon as COVID stopped everything.
Right.
Hopefully, once we're all vaccinated and the threat of contagion is so low that we can return to being social, we will do that again.
Right.
We will have our groups meeting, our book club,
Yeah, there's so many programs, the book club, the Shakespeare, the drama group that puts on the readings, and
exactly.
yeah, we have mahjong and cards and everything. I don't. Have you participated in the game groups at all?
No, I haven't. That's not my first line of interest. I've been thinking of playing mahjong. I did when I was a teenager.
Right.
We played mahjong
Yeah.
in those days too, and I thought it might be fun. One weekend away, one of my friends brought dominoes, and we
Right.
were playing dominoes, and I thought, gee, that's fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a thing sort of against games, because I always, even if it's really fun, I always think, gee, I'd just really like to talk to Augie and find out about her life. Why am I saying, here's 3 and you get 4 and whatever? I don't know if you really get to know people playing games, or maybe you get to know them better, but I like to talk to people.
Well, you do both. You play the game and talk.
You
You do both at
Okay.
the same time. I mean, as a teenager, we certainly played cards.
Right.
One of the things, I know my father and his friends used to play card game called Pinochle, and I was wondering whether anyone, I don't know what the game is. I know it's a card game.
We could look on the internet. We could start a Pinochle club.
And start a Pinochle club just for old time's
Right.
sake to see what
Anyway.
my dad played.
Well, I really appreciate you sitting down with me and talking about these things, and I look forward to more dinners and getting to know you better. It's one of the things, we have these bio books, but they're just, on the surface. And, otherwise, I mean, how do people know these beautiful artworks? One thing I will say, they do get some sense of your artistic background and interest by your doorway. Your your family does this wonderful job of putting up displays, and it's just like a little entrance to an oasis. Come to Augie's room. And anyway, so thank you very much, Augie. It's been a real pleasure and privilege to talk with you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you
Great.
and to show my jewelry.
Yes, just lovely.